And he invited me along to this thing, and the lady there said something that really rang true. She said, we in New Zealand were voted the nicest people on Earth, of any country on Earth. And she said, that's great for us as people. It's not great for us as dramatists. And she said, the reason for that is it means we're reluctant to really dig to the dark depths. And I think if there's going to be a resurgence of horror, is going to be cheap horror, I think the main thing is for people to start really putting a bit more truth in there, a bit more personal truth.
We've talked about all these other movies and stuff for an hour, which I wanted to do, but now let's move on to New Zealand, about writing. Right. And this is where I'm going to let Shane, because he knows a lot more about New Zealand film than I do.
I've never heard of Mr. Wrong, so you proved me out on that one.
And and ask the questions we need to ask and find out more about the book and your research work, who you've been talking to, and so on.
Is the book going to go like in a order by age, or is it just going to be a sort of
it'll be chronological
by categories, or?
No, it'll be chronological. And the only reason I can say that is because it's the only thing I ever thought of. I think I might have tried
some of the oldest ones that you've got examples of, because I won't know these ones.
Well, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because New Zealand horror movies really only go back to the early 80s. But I'm starting pretty much from the birth of cinema, because one of the first significant people in this story is a guy called Rupert Julian, who was a New Zealander from Whangaroa, which is up near where you guys are, actually. He ended up he's barely known in this country, but he went to Hollywood in the 1910s, and at one brief point was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. He was a director star. 1918 he directed and starred in a movie called The Kaiser, the Beast of Berlin, because he bore a striking resemblance to Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, who they just fought World War One. And that was a big movie, made for $1 million, and was one of the biggest movies that year. He then obviously became a sort of prestige director, and in 1925 he directed The Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, which was Universal's biggest movie of that year. Unfortunately, he's sort of become a footnote in the history, because he didn't really have a legacy he didn't have anyone to look after his legacy. Him and his wife, they never had kids. His career kind of faded in Hollywood. He wasn't terribly well liked in Hollywood. I mean, consequently, the only thing that's generally known about him is that he directed Phantom of the Opera, and Lon Chaney didn't like him. So thankfully, for those who might be interested in this, Robert Cato, who's a journalist and photographer over here, he has a website about Rupert Julian, and he's unearthed a lot of very interesting stuff. And so it kind of starts there. I'm also looking at expat Kiwi actors who went and were in Hammer horror films, people like Ewan Solon or Kiwi Kingston, one of the cast members of Legend of Hell House, his name escapes me at the moment, but and also a guy called David Warbeck, who's from Christchurch, and he never made a movie over here, but he started out. He was very close to playing James Bond at one point. He was like down to the last two, I think, until they smoothed over some issues with Roger Moore and got that one. But then he's in a couple of Hammer horrors, and he had quite a significant career in cult movies in Italy. So he's in Lucio Fulci's The Beyond and The Black Cat. He's probably best known for a short but significant role in Sergio Leone's film A Fistful of Dynamite. So looking at all those people, and then and also in parallel with that, talking about the history of New Zealand film, because I kind of think, well, if you're going to talk about genre, you kind of have to talk about all the rest of it as well and fill in the blanks. But then it's not really till we get to 1981 with Dead Kids that you get for what can be called the first proper, well, as far as I'm concerned, the first proper New Zealand horror film, even though it's American originated. So that was a slasher movie.
Was it filmed in New Zealand? Financed by America.
Yeah, so it was a American writer and director, and American writer and director. So Bill Condon was the writer. He's now gone on to make films like the Beauty and the Beast remake and Gods and Monsters, and he's a big Hollywood director now. And a director called Michael Laughlin, who passed away end of last year, sadly. But and they were going to make a slash movie. They knew it would, get done quickly, but it ended up being made in Auckland, in Parnell, and Ponsonby. No, Remuera. But it was mostly Kiwi money, and it was mostly Kiwi crew, and there's some New Zealand actors in there as well. So for my book, I'm counting it as a Kiwi movie. Yeah, and it's a terrific little film. Actually, it's like a sort of a hybrid of slasher movie and sort of 50s mad scientist movie. It's a terrific ramshackle little film that's got like a little dance number in the middle of it, and it's got Oscar winners slumming it, and it's got it's got some good chase sequences. It's got some crap bits in it, and that's fine. And then it's the first sort of proper New Zealand horror movie. I think would be The Scarecrow from 1982, which is more sort of a family-friendly horror film. Actually, it's one of the last films that John Carradine did. And you can tell it's a film about a mysterious man turns up in small town New Zealand. Odd stuff starts happening. John Carradine plays the mysterious old man, and he looks like he perhaps should not have been working at that point because he's so decrepit in it. He's doing a good performance, but it's, you do feel a bit sorry for him. But and you've got Next of Kin, which is 1982, and that's
isn't that an Australian one, or is that a New Zealand Australian?
So that's New Zealand Australian. It's originated in New Zealand, so it would have been a New Zealand made movie had they been able to get the money together sooner. But they met an Australian producer who went, "Come over here, we'll get it made, no worries." But the writer, director, and producer team were Kiwis.
Okay.
Again, I'm counting it. It's it may be a Pavlova debate, for that goes on for years.
Most modern films are all co-productions now, so I'd count it.
Exactly.
It's also got your favourite from Wolf Creek in it.
Yeah,
when
John
he's
Jarrett.
very young. Yeah, what's his name? The actor?
John Jarrett. Yeah.
The villain from Wolf Creek, isn't it? When he's in his 20s, maybe.
Yeah, he's got that dimple that you could lose light in, that dimple in his chin. That's a terrific movie, Next of Kin. That's so good. And I talked to the director, Tony Williams, and he's a lovely man. He's absolutely genuinely. Because Next of Kin unfortunately bombed at the box office. It just sort of killed his film career. And it's such a shame because you watch that movie and it's so well directed. There are so many brilliant ideas. Yeah. If you go on YouTube, you find his channel on YouTube. He's got all his adverts he's made over the years, and they're entertaining adverts to watch. When was the last time you saw an advert that you didn't irritate the tits off you? And he's got this wellspring of all these stuff, and and you watch those, and his storytelling is incredible. And Next of Kin is, it gets compared. Personally, I think it's better. Controversial view, but I'm going to put that one out there. So
watch it.
I watched that one recently because I watched a Ozploitation documentary.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Split
And
Fiction.
I think Quentin Tarantino and several other directors were all talking about Next of Kin.
Yeah.
So after I heard Tarantino say you better watch it, I'm like, yeah.
Was that not quite
One of them
Hollywood?
compared it to The Shining.
Yeah.
But it's not quite that good.
See, I disagree with that. I think it's better. I think it is better. I think The Shining is a very good movie. I don't think it's a great horror movie. So that's my other half. She's turned up. I knew I should have shut the door.
That's fine.
Bit of background action, just if anyone wants.
Talking about Shining, let's have a little sidebar with Stephen King. His old stuff, right? Like his really old stuff, like was really good. And some when you look at like maybe say, was it about Gunslinger? Is when he's stopped as being good, like especially the recent It.
Stephen King fan.
Yeah, I used to be a huge Stephen King fan, right? And that's a good thing. I was going to get you something with It for Christmas. But, yeah. So It was my first Stephen King book to read. Right, big, huge, 1,100 pages, whatever. And then I went backwards because my dad's into horror, and he reads all the time, and not just horror but everything. And he had he had the other Stephen King stuff. But I remember Johnny's, here's Johnny, and that was so cool. And then watching It as Tim Curry as It, and it suddenly, like, over maybe about 1990 or 2000s, just became bad, like blasé books, and just couldn't do it. I think Gerald's Game was the last one I read of it that I actually I tried to read and couldn't read it. Yeah.
I mean, confession time. I have never read a single Stephen King book, and I may have just lost a whole load of potential readers for this book. I should also say, I spent most of the last year catching up with horror literature. I realized when I started reading this book, I didn't realize I had read almost nothing. So I've read Carmilla, Dracula, Phantom of the Opera. I've got The Exorcist on the go. I'm reading Michael's book. I've just been like trying desperately to catch up with stuff. So I will watch it. But I am no Stephen King expert at all, and I'm ashamed of myself. I don't think I'm gonna. I'm not rushing out to read It because that looks a bit long.
Shining, It, Cujo. Cujo is pretty good.
Misery.
Yeah. Misery.
Misery is great.
Misery. Dude, Misery.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely Misery. Misery's up there with Shining, I reckon. Yeah. Because Stanley Kubrick was really good.
He put some of his own.
Yeah.
He put some of his own stuff into Misery, which is why I think it works. Because it's about a writer and fan.
The Dark Half is about the same thing. Yeah. That was one of my. I like Dark Half. That's really cool. It's a book.
Yeah, what's the New Zealand filmmakers? Are there any filmmakers in the horror thing that have done more than one or two, apart from Peter Jackson?
At the moment we've got there's Jason Statter, who did The Dead Room and The Locals, and no, sorry, he didn't do The Locals. What am I saying? The Locals was someone else. But the one, but David Blythe is the real sort of, I think, the real horror, the really interesting horror film. Yeah, who did he'd be most famous for doing Death Warmed Up in 1984. Which is very splattery mishmash of, I don't know, revenge flick, zombie movies, mad
that
science.
was a hard one to follow, that film.
I mean it's then he had a brief flirtation with Hollywood, but that unfortunately for him didn't really work out. Mind you, that said, I think to an extent he dodged a bullet because he was going to do the third House movie. It was House 3, the horror show, and that one. But that's
House 1 and 2.
Yeah,
House 3 is the greatest American hero actor and the haunted house, and the son goes missing in the pool.
think I've seen that.
You've seen it. It was an 80s hit.
Yeah.
It was at every video shop.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost a reminder of a Poltergeist.
Ding Dong, You're Dead was the cover.
Right.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, the disembodied. Yeah. Yeah, and then he did. So he's and I think he's so interesting because I don't know that any of his films, with all due respect to him, I don't know that any of his films are masterpieces, but I think he is one of the most interesting voices in New Zealand film in terms of.
So what he did, Death Warmed Up. What was some of the other ones he did then?
So he did Red-Blooded American Girl and Red-Blooded American Girl 2. He did Angel Mine in 1978. It was his first film. That's a very sort of strange mockumentary satire thing about suburban life in New Zealand. That's really weird and messed up. He did I think one of the most, not just one of the most striking New Zealand horror movies, but one of the most striking New Zealand movies ever made. Back in 2010, he did a film called Wound, which is one of the most messed up movies I think I've ever seen. It's a very, very dark, psychosexual head trip that has got dismembered. You know, in the first 5 minutes, you've seen a couple going through a sort of BDSM session, and then a woman gorily cuts her dad's cock off with some scissors. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not half of it. That's not the half of it. And it's quite something. It's one of those films that I could totally see why everyone else, if I recommend it to everyone else, said to me, that's complete rubbish. What are you talking about? That's horrible. But I think it's so interesting, and I think it might be his best film. Even though it's like being a fan of Only God Forgives. I might have to accept that no one else will like it, but Wound is one to check out. It's I think it's a lot. It's esoteric and sort of like a midpoint between, I'd say, Peter Jackson and something like David Lynch or Jodorowsky. Like, as David Blythe is, I spoke with him, and he is a big. His main influence is Louis Buñuel, you know, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie and L'Âge d'Or and all those sort of surrealist European satires. He's very much into that. But at the same time, I like that he's got this visceral edge that's a lot of sex, a lot of gore, and he likes to sort of dig into those areas in these really weird films. I mean, there's no one else in New Zealand who's quite like that, and they may not be the best, most respectable films in the world, but I think they're so interesting, and it really kills me that he spent the first 15 years of his career being told your films are shit, fuck off, stop making movies, and then the last 25 of them just fading away and being forgotten. And I think it's a crying shame, because I think he's so unique. I spoke to him, and at the moment he's just struggling to get a theatre play together in a small theatre in Auckland, and it's sort of like, feels a bit unfair when you see mediocrities getting praised to the hilt, but yeah, I'd say his stuff, check it out, because you may not, you might love it, you might not, you won't forget it.
I feel like I have seen Wound somehow. Yeah.
I only heard about it because I started researching this. It was only made about 10 years ago, but I can see why. Again, it's one of those films I can see why it might have been buried, because it wasn't, acceptable in the right way. I don't mean that in a kind of it's political correctness got mad. I mean, it's just so odd and weird and esoteric that I can see why it's not it's not Hunt for the Wilder People. But.
Talking about weird and thing, like you've got Japanese horror, right? And they always deal with like the mutant girls, and the most recent one I've seen is Chainsaw Girl or Chainsaw Woman.
Yeah.
And it's
that's the J Splatter.
That's the one. Yeah. So, I mean, we're moving through our ones. Is that like bad taste would be classed as splatter?
It would be
Oh.
because the day splatter is it's harmless. It's not it's gory and violent, but it's never serious.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
going
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just fun.
Yeah.
I watched Bad Taste again a couple of years ago for the first time since I was a teenager, and it still holds up. I love it to bits. And it gets through, I think, purely on that basis of the sheer exuberance. You watch Bad Taste and you're watching someone who loves movies and loves the fact that he's making a movie, and it's just so much fun. And it annoys me when people say they don't like it, because just go, no, you don't get it, you're wrong.
It's a bit like Meet the People, right?
I love Meet
Yeah.
the Peoples.
It's fun.
I honestly think that when Peter Jackson got millions of dollars to make Lord of the Rings, he became a worse director.
Yeah, he's never quite.
I think his creativity just went.
Mind you, that said, that World War I documentary he did, I thought was the best thing he'd done in years. But yeah, the bigger stuff, I like it, but I don't love it.
Yeah,
that was Star Wars.
No, the Mortal Engines.
Yeah, which was Star Wars with a different bloody visual.
Yeah, so like it came and went. Nobody really talks about it, and you kind of think like, well,
I mean, I shouldn't be shitting on Peter Jackson, because I know with a Hollywood production, you've got 8 producers all sitting there going, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. You've got to please as many people as possible. You have to have a happy ending. You've got to make it look good. Like, you're not allowed to stand out and be weird, because people might not like it.
Quentin Tarantino said just this week that he would never work for Marvel.
Yeah.
Because he said that you're basically a hired hand. I'm not looking, and he goes, I'm not looking for a job.
Yeah,
I make movies for me. You know, basically, I'm not looking for a job. And if you're going to Marvel, you're looking for a job, right?
Yeah,
and you're a hired hand. They tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. It's like you watch Taika's. Like, I haven't seen the last one because I just couldn't stand the one before it, right? Thor.
Yeah.
Like this. I think the second one's really good. Yeah, Ragnarok was good. My sister went to see it 3 times at the theater. It was nice and fun. But then it was like, now you got to make it more fun. Now you got to make it more comedy. Now you got to make it more. It's like, you got to pull back and, you know, do it right, like you did it before. But it's like, but that's the thing. Like, you got 6 different producers and executives there telling
$120 million that you can't waste.
Yeah. But then the other thing is, like, you see all these people that actually waste it, and nothing happens, and they get the new job over and over again. And it's just stupid. It's like, why?
Yeah.
I think that's why people love horror movies, though, because most of them are made on the cheap.
Yeah.
And when you make a movie on the cheap, like, this is the guy from Trauma talking about movies years ago.
Yeah.
Because they pay for their own films. He's like, we make a film for $200,000.
Yeah.
We hardly have to please anyone to get our money back.
Yeah.
So we do what we want, and we do it in our style, and we do exactly what we want, and we say what we want, because the risk is low, and we're going to make what we like. And I think the thing is, with Hollywood movies, you cannot risk anything. Like, you've got to please as many people as possible, and that's what makes it generic and boring and stuff. But horror movies are renowned for being able to make something cheap and make a huge profit. So you can try crazy stuff.
I think Smile made it for about 40 million, or maybe even 20 million. It was very low, and it made lots of money.
Yeah,
and there was
that's a big budget for a horror movie. 20 million.
But and the promotion behind was huge as well.
Yeah,
but I think there's something else that came up right next to it, died on the cinema the same week, that it was out.
I think that's the it's not just the it's sort of 2 things, really, isn't it? It's because horror, again, much like comedy, I mean, the parallels between the 2 are just never ending, but horror so hinges on the unexpected, obviously. So and I think and Hollywood doesn't, so they have to keep being told again and again and again, unless they just get bulldozed by a director who's egotistical enough to to get their own way to the end goalpost. But that's why oftentimes Hollywood, for the best part of the last 60 years, Hollywood horror has been catching up with the independents. You'd have to go back to like the 40s and 50s to find Hollywood horror that was the best stuff in the world. You have to go back to like Jacques Tourneur or Val Lewton, well, both, or Don Siegel doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers to find. So that wasn't a Hollywood movie, though. That was an independent movie. Anyway, but you know what I mean. It's there is more.
There is more creativity in independent than there will ever be in the mainstream.
Yeah,
and you're right about them catching up. It's because a lot of what's been created in the independent circle, they just poach and take and make it mainstream.
Yeah,
and and they try over and over again to do it, but the whole point of reboots is they're trying to catch the same, the same buzz that it had originally with these movies, but they don't work unless
it's really hard because it could just be the timing too.
Yeah,
I don't think my friends all loved Nightmare on Elm Street. They loved it.
Yeah,
I could not watch that nowadays because I just don't find Freddy Krueger to be scary in any way at all. He did turn into a comedy character.
Yeah,
and I can't forget that.
I love.
And I don't think that would work if they remade it now. I think it would just be.
Yeah, I love Wes Craven. I'm not a massive fan of Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, I don't. It doesn't. That one. I like it, but I don't love it. Yeah. I think going back to the New Zealand movies, I think actually, because almost all these movies are low budget, with the exception of like The Frighteners. I think that's what's nice and surprising with New Zealand movies is particularly the stuff from the 80s, I think, is that those movies were made by filmmakers who were using horror to explore areas of New Zealand culture and the New Zealand psyche that other genres just don't go to. And I think the worst New Zealand horror movies are ones that are just trying to be something else. They're trying to copy, they're trying to sort of be a generic product that they've seen before. And the best New Zealand horror movies can be that, but they're also got that distinct flavor because they come from this isolated country in the Pacific. That's and that's why I think maybe the 80s stuff is maybe a bit more appealing to me because it's back when New Zealand still was really isolated, and so to me as an outsider to an extent, I'm seeing things that and ideas and characteristics that I otherwise wouldn't do. So something like The Lost Tribe or Death Warmed Up or Mr. Wrong, or even something like Bridge to Nowhere, which is not a good film, but it's got stuff about it that's different, So I think that's been a lot of the enjoyment of researching this has been seeing what dark areas is like.
There is a lot of Huey horror, more so than anything else, really. The only thing we really know about out of New Zealand that is it's big budget stuff that I can think of that comes out, but and so when you look at horror, you probably get one a month, one every couple of months coming out of New Zealand. That's really good. Or maybe I'm in the wrong there, but I'm looking at like Black Sheep, The Locals, The Frighteners, Deathgasm. What else did he do? Yeah, I Survived the Zombie Holocaust.
Good movie.
Yeah.
I like that film.
You got that one.
I know half the plots in that.
Have I seen? Trying to remember if I've seen Blood Punch, right?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Housebound. Oh, I think I've seen Housebound.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yes, I watched half of Housebound this morning, and I have to finish watching it tonight because
it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Brain Dead. Love it. Lawnmower Massacre.
I want to talk about Deathgasm, just a side note, right? Because I'm a metalhead, and so is he. So when you bring heavy metal into a horror scene, right? and the other ones are Hard Candy, right? So you got Hard Candy, and you got Deathgasm. The two awesome movies about music, with horror. I mean, horror movies with music as a thing. And have you been able to talk to this dude about his movie? I can't remember.
No, I think. I think I might have sent out an email a while back, but again, I think because he's he's doing very well for himself, so someone like me to come along. But yeah, Deathgasm I think is so much fun and actually quite smart in terms of how it's. I'm not
Jason Lee Howard. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
Howard.
Jason,
our eyes are not too good. They're really tiny things. So Jason Lee with L-E-I Howden. Yeah. So, I mean, having someone like that do well in current day with New Zealand horror, I think it's really good to have someone like that. What is it called? A leader or a thing? Because I mean, we've had Peter Jackson, right?
Yeah.
In the 80s, and so he's got mainstream and done really well, put us on the map. Now we have Jason basically doing it again. Yeah. It seems like the younger Peter, and I think what he's doing is really awesome. I really think, as a horror, as a horror fan, and as a seeing a New Zealand horror do really well is really cool to see. Yeah. And when I realized it was made in New Zealand, I was really excited even more because hey, it's a horror, it's metal, the two things I love, and it's Kiwi, which is I love to promote that even more. No, I haven't seen was it the Lost Tribe, the zombie one? The Maori.
The Deadlands.
Deadlands. I haven't seen Deadlands.
That's really good.
Now, have you talked to these guys about the books?
The Deadlands. I haven't. I think I've sent out probes again. I've yet to hear back. But I like Toa Fraser is a very interesting director because you never know what genre he's going to do next. He's done Dean Spanley, which was a sort of an old sort of 19th, 20th century satire thing. Then he goes Deadlands, which is a big epic apocalypto-like horror action hybrid. Then he does 6 Days, which was about the storming of the Iranian embassy in the 82. Yeah, and he's but Deadlands I think is probably his best work, and it's it blends all those sort of genre elements so well. I think that's what it has in common with Deathgasm actually. I think because a lot of times New Zealanders, perhaps more than most, like to mix up the genres. Which I think perhaps comes from Galen Preston's thing of, gotta have a bit of a laugh, have a bit of a scare, have a bit of this. And so they like to sort of put in as many mixes as possible. Sometimes that just goes off in a million different directions and doesn't work. But with Deathgasm and Deadlands, they
it's really a bit like, back to Thor Ragnarok and then What It Love and Thunder is, right? It worked there and then gone too far the other side.
Yeah.
And what was the other movie before Deathgasm with Jason Lee?
I think that was his first movie. I think, but he did Guns Akimbo after that.
That's it. Yeah. So he went action with that one. That was pretty crazy. Yeah.
He's got a nice. Jason Lee Loudon's got a nice. So he's got an Edgar Wright vibe about him. He's really. He's able to really stylishly mesh big way as well.
Yeah. Oh, Baby Driver was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a New Zealand film New Zealand Canadian film. It's not really a horror, but I just think it kind of fits the bill because of the aesthetic. It's the Turbo Kid.
Excuse me, sorry. Tea returning on me again. With Michael Ironside.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's great. It's an awesome film.
Okay, gonna have to watch it.
Yeah,
I sort of passed over it because it was called Turbo Kid, and I'm like, yeah, I'm past.
It's kind of a apocalyptic world with lots of violence. It's very J Splatter violence. Very over the top.
Even the
I'm
trailers.
thinking of like the man, boy and his dog. All of a sudden in my head.
You know, on this series.
No. Yeah.
So what's some of the most recent New Zealand horror that you've seen? Because I've only just recently heard about X and Pearl. Are there any other recent ones that you would have seen or would recommend?
I think the most recent ones I've seen, there was one I would recommend that I haven't seen, but I've heard good things about, was Reunion from a couple of years ago, which had Julia Ormond in it. That was on for all of about a week, and I can go and see it, but I think it was but no, Come to Daddy, the Ant Timpson one, which I think we all know. That's which again, I rewatched that one. There's only been a couple of bits and bobs left. I mean, this is the thing with New Zealand horror as a subgenre of horror. I've sort of picked a good one because there's not that many. If I was doing any other subgenre of horror, I'd be looking at thousands of bloody movies. Yeah. But thankfully, there's still a lot because there's only about 70 odd in terms of like the canon of New Zealand horror movies. So stuff
instead of like 1,000 you gotta work with.
Yeah. The plus side too is that the range of horror in New Zealand is pretty wide. There's not like 50 slasher movies. It's a lot of, like Come to Daddy is a bizarre little film.
Yeah.
But
I mean, is it even
performances in it are great.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Elijah Wood. Well, I think Elijah Wood and Ant Timpson have quite a working together quite a while because they did Greasy Strangler together and I think a couple of other movies. And Come to Daddy, the first time I watched it, I just it sort of went over my head a bit, and then I rewatched it, and that's so much more of an interesting movie. It's I don't quite know what's going on in there, and I'm desperate to talk to Ant Timpson about that film because there's so much to unpack in that thing. Michael Smiley.
Halfway through that film myself, I was watching it and I was interested, but I didn't know if I actually liked the film. But by the time it ended, I was like, "That's an awesome film."
Yeah.
But it took a while to get going. But I like the fact it had some good twists in it.
Yeah, and it has a fantastically feral line towards the beginning when Stephen McHattie is pretending to be spoilers for anyone who's hasn't seen. Stephen McHattie says to Elijah Wood something along the lines of, "You're going to die and be left as a skeleton, and there'll be rats just chewing away at where your vagina was." It's one of those lines you just go, "That's so disgusting. That was worth the whole movie. The whole movie could have been rubbish, but it would be worth it. That line alone." It's Come to Daddy is one of those ones that is definitely rewarded rewatching. I think I saw a review that called it the worst film of 2019. You went, "What the fuck are you on about? There's
no
worst movies that year."
I think the worst film of any year is anything that costs $150 million and you can get it straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to the cinema and I watched some of the new Star Wars films. And I walked out and went, "That was fun." And then my friends asked me what it was about the next day, and I just went, "Oh, they just blew up the Death Star again."
They just regretted the first three movies.
Like seriously, the only good new Star Wars I think was Rogue One.
Yes.
Oh, I like Rogue One.
Yeah. I've got a figurine here somewhere.
But I honestly, when people ask me personally about bad movies, I usually rank anything that costs hundreds of millions of dollars and bored me as worse than like Troll 2. I'd rather watch Troll 2.
Oh yeah, Troll 2 is great fun. Yeah. No, if it has to be a really, I mean, the two movies from recent years that have really, really wound me up have been Halloween Kills, which I because I really enjoyed Halloween 2018, and Halloween Kills I thought was so pretentious and just badly made, and we haven't got time left for me to talk about how much I don't like that. And also,
was it worse than Jason? Was it in space or something like that?
Oh God, yes, Jason. Yeah, no, Jason X is an all right movie. Jason X is dumb fun.
Just turn your brain off, and it's great.
Yeah. That's what I remember from just being fun movie.
Halloween Kills has nothing to compare to the face freeze kill in Jason X. So and the other one was The Greatest Showman. I cannot tell you, and I was on a date when I went and saw that one, so it was in my best interest to pretend that I liked it, and I couldn't even do that. I hated that movie so much. I thought that was on a level of Cannibal Holocaust in terms of how hypocritical it was. And I've been thinking about doing a show about how much I hate that movie and why. I hate Hugh Jackman.
I usually don't hate on movies. When it comes to horror, I kind of go, I liked it or I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And usually I like it. I don't think of a lot of horror movies. I just go, that was fun. And that's it.
Yeah.
Next movie, please. But when you, especially like you said, if they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a movie and nobody remembers, that's a huge, hole they've dug for themselves they can't get out of. Then they've got to make another dumb $100 million movie try to get out of. But I mean, if you make about, say, for the same $100 million, $10 million movies, you'd make just as much, and you'd have probably one or two of them will be very well received.
Well, isn't that the Blumhouse Productions? Isn't that their theory that they make every movie for 10 million or less?
Yeah.
And that way they can make a lot more. Like if they have one or two that flop, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because that's basically the way you got to look at it. Why spend hundreds of millions of dollars on one movie when you can make the same 10 for the same price?
Well, it's interesting you should bring up Blumhouse because, of course, Universal tried to do that Dark Universe thing with The Mummy, and that bombed. That was a terrible movie, and it bombed. And then they pushed that off to Blumhouse, and then they made The Invisible Man, which was a much better movie, and they made that for about 10 million or something like that. So
that was a scary film. That was good.
Yeah, and The Mummy was made by people who clearly didn't like horror, didn't want to make a horror. Yeah, appalling movie.
I did hear that Mr. Tom Cruise got to put a lot of his say into that Universal thing, and that did not work well because everything he wanted was action movie based.
Yeah.
You kind of forgot what you're aiming for there.
So that's a Mummy,
Wolfman,
Frankenstein. What's the other one?
Dracula.
Some of the classics.
Invisible Man
from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, I thought that was it. That was the fourth one, Creature from Black Lagoon.
There's a lot.
So, what was the other one? Oh yeah, so the most recent series of horrors that I watched is called the Netflix thing show. Who did Pan's Labyrinth?
Del Toro.
Yeah,
Del Toro.
Del Toro.
Yeah.
There's a couple of duds. It's just like Blumhouse, right? So there's 45-minute, 50-minute episodes of standalone movies, basically hour-long movies.
Yeah.
And anthology. The first one for me was if they took away all the racist stuff in it, it would have been a great movie.
Okay.
I walk into a cinema and I hear the same millionth thing for the millionth time in any movie that's coming out right now. And so I basically said, this is not a good way to invite your audience into watching your whole series, because everybody's tired of that whole regurgitated white man bad, racist. Put it in the middle, fine. And the start, no, because there's some really, really amazing, exciting episodes in it. There's Autopsy. Episode Autopsy. You've seen it? Yeah. So the Autopsy, brilliant. It's just so well written, well done. I think David Goyer did one episode, wrote and directed one episode as well. And there's some, when you have like 8 episodes of 1 hour movies, I reckon he probably spent 100 million on that. You know, Netflix would say, here's 100 million. Now there's 10 episodes. Now there's a couple he could have stretched into whole hour-and-a-half movies, and they could have played at the cinema, would have been fine.
Yeah,
and it would have fit well, and they would have made 100 million or maybe more for them. But I think that whole idea 10 for the same price is brilliant, and I think you're right. Blumhouse doing it that way.
It gives you more chance to take risks, and I mean risks pay off in horror movies. Yeah, they pay off in comedies too. Like you don't remember the average ones.
Yeah, no, you and I think that also comes down to. It may not even may be something that's not even on the surface of it terribly groundbreaking, but if it's just really it's something you didn't know, but it was solidly made, and it really just hit every sweet spot. Knew what to do, and that's so like I guess going back to things like Blair Witch Project, that just was a hit. It came out of nowhere, but they knew what to do. They knew what they were doing, and they had their idea, and it had been done before, but they found a new way. They found their own way through it and just did it really well. Well, obviously, for some people don't find Blair Witch Project scary at all. I'm not one of those people. It terrifies me.
It didn't do anything for me.
Yeah,
but I didn't see it at the cinema though. That's the thing. I didn't see it at the cinema on opening it. I saw a video of VHS or whatever it was on. Blair Witch. Hey, I want to talk about excuse me, Babadook. Is it Babadook? Babadook. So Babadook is basically, I think it was last weekend, was mentioned as a story, short story plot in the Simpsons.
Okay.
Yeah. So this little horror thing, is part of the Simpsons lexicon now. I don't know how much that movie cost, but I mean,
that was a low budget.
Yeah, a low budget horror movie makes it all the way into this, into Simpsons.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So you can see, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be this huge, $100 million horror movie to make it impactful. And the fact that small movies can make something like It Follows, that was pretty brilliant, intelligent, and I don't think that cost a lot because there was no special effects or anything to it.
So
I was on my own.
Sorry, you've been doing all this research about New Zealand films and all the past ones. Have you got any? Are there any upcoming ones that you've heard about, or you've talked to anyone that's working on upcoming?
Yeah, I was talking to Costa Boats, and he who's part of Bad Taste, and he did a if you go on NZ On Screen, you can find an episode of a TV episode he did back in the 80s called The Lamb of God, which is a good little spooky sheep-based horror. But he was talking that he'd done a bit of writing with Jason Statter on a new film called, I believe it was called Barbed Wire Canoe. That may be a working title, but yeah, he's working on that at the moment. And and it said whatever it's like, it seems worth supporting, just because apparently he, for someone who's been working in the industry for a long time, he could get no money for the damn thing, and so he's had to do it very, very low budget. So hopefully that will come out. That'll come out soon, and that'll be worth seeking out and watching. And there's also obviously Ant Timpson's making a new movie with Adrian Brody's in it. I can't remember what the name of it is. It's something to do with a lizard. But so that's coming up. And hopefully sometime soon Peter Jackson will make a new horror movie. But and actually, do you know what? I was talking to Gayleen Preston. This was a couple of years ago, but and because she'd done Mr. Wrong, and we're going to talk about Perfect Strangers as well. And she actually said, "Oh, do you think I should make it a trilogy?" I said, "Yeah, now's perfect time for another one, because there's also been this resurgence of female-led horror." So it'd be perfect for you to come, traipsing back in and making a new one. So hopefully that one comes to fruition. But I haven't heard much more than that. But they're not saying that. I feel like there's going to be some horrible, like there might be some big glaring thing that's in the news that I've missed, like some major Kiwi filmmakers announced a horror film and I've forgotten. Yeah. So there's a couple of little bobs.
As we come to the last 15 minutes or so, I was wondering, like, with the the surge of crowdfunding, right? As well as yourself funding it for your book and stuff, trying to look for published and so on. Before I get into that, have you had to, like, when you're writing and using references and stuff, did you have to do some legal thing? Like, did you have to somehow get some what is that called? Rights to images or something, or are you using images in your book?
Yeah, there's
isn't it under the review, and are you allowed to legally use things when you're reviewing or discussing?
I will have to get permissions, and I may even have to pay for some stuff. But thus far, luckily, the images I've been given, the people I've spoken to have just said, yeah, sure, just, as and when the time comes, just send them, tell them to send an email and we'll okay it. But there inevitably will be stuff to pay for. So yeah, that's going to be going to be interesting. So I keep notes on that very definitely. But
let's move into, that's why I thought, like, let's put that before with the crowdfunding. So with Kiwi Films and the cost and stuff and how hard it is to get funding for these projects, what do you think about, like, even for your book, right? For independent creators, especially in the horror genre in New Zealand, being able, maybe have you heard of anybody looking towards doing crowdfunding for getting the movies off the ground, or the shorts or whatever?
What have I heard recently? Not an awful lot, but yeah, I'm nervous about doing crowdfunding for my work because I'm terrible at self-promotion, and I know that if we crowdfund to get it published, it's going to require, you got to sort of like dedicate yourself for the full month and really get it out there. And it's
a year.
Yeah,
it's a year.
Yeah, tips on crowdfunding. This guy here is quite good at self-promotion.
Yeah. Mike, like, I mean, seriously, like Mike, did everything self, crowdfunding and stuff, and then getting it out there, because he said he learned it from somebody else, female New Zealand writer, who basically, does crowdfunds everything. Self-publishes everything, and is probably the richest New Zealand female writer, is what I heard last time. But yeah, so I mean, the idea is that, like, why, because I know it's easier when you do get a publisher behind you, but when you actually end up producing yourself, you're able to then say this is how it's going to be done. And I think when it comes to short films or horror films for New Zealand, I'm sure there's a bunch of Kiwis who would back horror. I would, right? Would back filmmakers to do that, because I would love to see a resurgence of film in New Zealand, because I don't want us to just be going backwards after having gone forwards really quickly during the Lord of the Rings period, right? We had so many movies come out because it was like, oh, let's make movie in New Zealand, See, that just reminds me, I actually wrote a spec script which was sent out to Hollywood.
Yeah.
That script was taken because I wanted to write about Whangarei, and was made down south somewhere.
Right.
Now, the people who took it redid it for a movie in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Regurgitated the whole spec for Australia.
Right.
So it pisses me off that that's happened to my script, right?
Yeah.
But as someone who's studied film, who doesn't do film anymore, I want to see film to continue. And there was when we did at school, there was about 30 people in our school. I mean, in our class, the first year, I think we started with about 20, went down to 5 or 6. And graduates were around probably about 5, I think, out of all that, the way it came down to 3rd year. So out of that, I don't think anybody actually did film coming out of that class.
Yeah.
You know, I think some of them might have done some short stories or got involved in newspaper writing, critic. Whereas I basically had an accident and just went, I can't do standing up for that long to be a filmmaker, went into comic books. But I still have a passion for film. And I think that if more creatives, and even here locally, I still want to back our local stuff as well, that if more people get together, because look, cameras are cheap, right? Cameras are so cheap now. Equipment is so cheap now compared to 2004, right? 2006, when I graduated, it was 6K for a Sony camera.
Yeah.
Compared to now, you can pick it up for 2K.
Soderbergh or one of the other directors made one on his iPhone.
Yeah.
And it was released at cinemas.
Yeah.
More of them doing that. Yeah.
Well, talking about the budget side of things, when like The Evil Dead came out, it was a $400,000 movie. That's a low budget film.
Yeah.
But $300,000 of that was spent on film processing.
Yeah.
Which no longer exists.
Yeah.
You can buy a digital camera, so you could make The Evil Dead now for $100,000 or less.
Yeah, and edit it yourself.
And it would be done.
Yeah.
So I think filmmaking is, you're just going to get a lot more filmmaking. So.
Yeah. I think the main thing really is that I remember going to a screenwriting thing a couple of years ago, a few years ago now actually, with a mate of mine, Jimmy the Dwarf, who used to be on telly, lovely guy, and he invited me along to this thing, and the lady there said something that really rang true. She said, we in New Zealand were voted the nicest people on earth, of any country on earth. And she said, that's great for us as people. It's not great for us as dramatists. She said, the reason for that is it means we're reluctant to really dig to the dark depths. And I think if there's going to be a resurgence of horror, it's going to be cheap horror. I think the main thing is for people to start really putting a bit more truth in there, a bit more personal truth. I think I think in general, I see a lot of people sort of pointing to other people and saying, that's wrong with you, you're wrong. And I'm guilty of it myself. I'm absolutely guilty of it myself. I know for a fact that there is a stand-up show in me that needs to be about everything I've done wrong in the past. But I think the main thing is for people to start. I don't think it's a specifically Kiwi thing, but I do feel it's particularly important in this country that horror is a perfect vessel for exploring your darker side, and I think that would be quite refreshing and could be quite revolutionary in its own way, for want of a better word. But so I think that's the technology is available and it's out there, but it's also having the idea and the personality and the willingness to go to the places that perhaps are not the best part of oneself, sort of thing. I think that might be perhaps the direction I would like to see it go. But again, as those 80s movies, I think did it a bit more.
So as a writer and a person who's writing a book about New Zealand horror, have you ever written a script for a horror movie?
Yeah, of course I have. Yeah,
and what was it about? If you're not embarrassed.
Oh God, I think I wrote some. It's completely unmemorable, so I'm not embarrassed by it because I can't remember it. But it was. I think it was a zombie movie. I've come up with one at the moment because I did a bit of work this year. I mean, if the background here doesn't suggest enough, the struggling writer with not much money. I was working for a few months this year at Pack and Save doing a night shift. Sorry, an unnamed supermarket, and I thought up an idea for a supermarket-based slasher, which obviously, that's not going to be it's going to be quite a hard call. But it really came from, and I know I'm maybe not proud of this, but I mean, there's a lot more to the ideas that I've got. But really, the first thing I thought of was we were working at the Cardboard Crusher. I thought, why has no one ever used that in a horror movie? That'd be brilliant. Just
well, they've used a chipper.
Yeah, started thinking about that, and I thought, well, there's so much to write about in this situation. Night shift there's so much just in terms of like what you could do with a horror movie, but also so much to talk about in terms of
that
people.
Actually reminded me, I've got a very short story written down in one of my notebooks from years ago. I worked at a projectionist at a cinema. Yeah. And so I wrote a short horror about a projectionist that decided to try and make his own film, was terrible at it, and then basically made a snuff film to try and get it to be more realistic.
I like that. I
don't give away my story ideas, sorry, because I'm writing all the time.
Well, unfortunately, years later, I saw a 60s movie about a painter who basically did the same thing.
Oh, okay.
And he ended up using real blood for the red. It's like,
there's like no new ideas under the sun. It's how you interpret it, and I think that's what it's like. I mean, like you're talking about zombie movie like 2010. I had I was writing a zombie movie called Whale Bay, my favorite beach in the world, which is just up the road from here in Tuticaca. I love the beach so much. And I was down south and doing my film school and started writing something else, and then came up here and went, all right, this story. Haven't finished it, but I've done completed how it's going to end. I've done probably about 2/3 of it. I got asked last year by one of my other mates because he'd seen it, because I've got, what I do with my stories is I always make the logo, right? Because I know then I have a focus if I have the logo. I have the title, I have a focus. I spec it all out. Yeah. So I know what's going to happen right all the way through. Then I'll do a bit of dialogue and stuff. And so the current one I'm working on is a werewolf story, because I love werewolf. 30 Days a Night is vampires. So I'm doing I'm doing another one for a comic book, which is a vampire and a werewolf. And so, but how do you, even though these genres exist?
Are you doing Twilight?
No. Well, you talk about horror people here, not about romance rom-coms. Yeah. But so I mean, like, there is gonna I think I just want to see more. Like, as a Kiwi, I want to see more of our own art out there, and I think crowdfunding would suit us well.
Can I butt in then, because you've just given me the way Ari was describing his method of working. Do you have a certain method for your working?
I keep writing notes when I think of them, and then eventually I put them together into some into a long form piece. That is basically how I do things.
Do you move the notes around in order? Do you?
Kind of a little bit. But it tends to. I mean, most of it works up here. Like if I've got an appalling memory in some ways, but once I've written the thing down, it does stay up there. So I'll be writing. So once I'm writing the thing long form, and I tend to write pen and paper. I don't know why. I can't explain why. I just and all the stuff that I've written, I could have written it a year ago, but I'll remember it. But if you ask, if I go to the supermarket and I haven't got my shopping list on me, I can't bloody remember what I wrote 20 minutes ago.
Well, maybe you should have written your shopping list last year.
yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's a good point.
Everybody has a different method to it. Like you do it with pen and paper. I do it I go to get and type it into the into the app that I use.
I'm not completely analog, by the way. I do some, if I think up something on the bus, I just get the phone out and type it down, and ultimately it gets typed up into a thing. But the bulk of it is still pen and paper, not out of any kind of Luddite kind of belligerence. It's just what I do.
So with the pen and paper, how much of it is actually written down so far? Like, how close are you to finishing your book that we're promoting here?
Do you know what? Honestly, it could be about 95%, but there's so many notes that I'm not entirely sure. In terms of what's solidly written down, I've gotten. Actually, come to think of it, I was going to say I've got most of the chapters written, but then given that there's not that many chapters, they're all probably quite long. I guess almost a sixth of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing for me as a first time writer, frustrating is because if I was writing fiction, I'd be able to just go, no worries, no problem. But as soon as you get like half a sentence in with a non-fiction thing, you go, oh shit, I've got to fact check that. Hang about, I've got to stop going.
Reference that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
I can't do that, man. I can't do non-fiction ever.
Yeah. So that's proving that's what it seems to be quite stop start. So it's so it's a bit weird because I don't know many writers, so I don't have anyone, and I certainly don't know any non-fiction writers. So it's like I don't really know how you're meant to write these things. So what I'm doing at the moment is I just keep it's like chipping away at the coalface. Really, I just keep going, and then oh Christ, I don't know about this. So for example, like just starting writing about Rupert Julian, who I mentioned earlier, the Phantom of the Opera, and he was born in New Zealand in 1870, and you go, not in 1870, in the 1870s, and you go, right, I've got to write a little couple of sentences about New Zealand in the 1870s. What do I know about New Zealand in the 1870s? Oh Christ! So I went into town, I found a second-hand book about history of New Zealand. I got to read that, and then I can write 2 more sentences. So that's how it's going at the moment. But and the problem is at the moment, because I'm not funded at all. I got a mortgage to pay. So I work a full-time job, and I've got to get stuff done around the house. So it's finding the time. That's really the biggest problem. If I had even just a day to myself to sit down and write it, I would be so much further ahead. But I might even be done by then. But so it really at the moment it's requiring one person or a group of people to say, oh yeah, look at what I have written, because obviously I've got a chunk written because we had to send it off to publishers for them to say no, so it requires for one or more people to look at what I've written and go, oh, know your arsehole from your elbow. Here's yes, go and write it, sort of thing. So so it's a long-winded way of saying, there's acres of notes, absolutely acres, but it's about collating them. And also I've still got another thing is interviews. I've got to get interviews. So I can write. I've written like loads of reviews of the films, of my opinions of them, but I've also got to find facts about how they were made. What the filmmaker's intent for the film was and stuff like that. So,
have you thought about approaching Creative NZ for literature grant to try to get you?
Yes, a couple of people have mentioned about Creative NZ, and every time I look up at it, I've just missed the deadline. So because
I think that's one more thing you got to note down.
Yeah,
no,
I should have written that note last year.
But I mean, there's I don't think anybody's done horror literature on news on horror that you can think of. Can you? So that's a first. So that should be a plus for that. The fact that you're the first one who's going to do it, and the fact that you're doing chronologically makes it easier as well. Yeah. And so you can go by. I think who's the one who did comic history on his own? Yeah, Adrian Kennard like did a New Zealand horror. New Zealand comic history. So, I mean, there is so much avenues out there, but I mean, I think as a first-time writer, you just got to do it your way. I don't think doing it any other body's way is going to help. because as long as you do it your own way, everybody's going to know it's your voice. Because like you said about film, you know, people aren't looking for anybody else's voice on this. We don't want somebody else from somewhere else, you know, manufacturing your book, you know, having their voice through your book. We want your voice through your book. And I think that would help. And we'll be there. I'll be there to buy it because I would love to know our history, right?
Yeah.
Because it's New Zealand history. It's New Zealand cinema history.
Well, it's also horror fans. I mean, I have reached out to a couple of horror podcasts from overseas, and you know, horror fans will want to look, but will want to know, you know, the world over. They don't care where something comes from. They just want to know. That
So what film did they miss out on, right?
You've already listed a few.
Yeah, I've been taking notes on what I haven't seen, and I'm like thinking, okay, these are on my list. But that's the thing. So internationally, the horror fans are quite hardcore.
They're little fans.
Contrary to the perception of horror fans, are very open-minded. You know, probably more so than you know other groups of fans, shall we say? But I mean, I've had good feedback.
Well, we're loyal, like you said, we're loyal when it comes to horror. We know what we love, and we love it well.
If we like the film, we tell all our friends to go see it. In terms of like going back to the whole thing of finding out about like how to publish and whatnot. I mean, we've gone to a couple of major publishers, and they ultimately said no. But we had really good feedback from one of them. They're talking about having your own voice. I mean, what was the only thing they said? They said, yeah, he knows his stuff, and that's, you know, that was nice to hear because. You know, but they also said maybe tone down some of your opinions because I think I had been a bit abrasive about the actor Klaus Kinski. I think I referred to him as a insane German git, and and they said, oh, maybe don't write that. And I thought, okay, fair enough, I'll take that out. And then afterwards, I thought, no, actually, I might put that in. I might keep that, that one in because I don't think that's libelous at all.
Well, it's because I think people overseas are a bit more PC than we are, right? And I think that sort of comes into it, and they take it some other way. But you don't have to be abrasive.
PC in that horror book.
No,
the book about horror.
Well, I might have.
Where we, where we see people chopping up people, right? Words are not violent, people. Violence is violent.
Chainsaws are violent.
Yeah.
No, but it's
so one of the things I was thinking, like the Seeker group, you know, on the back.
Yeah,
you could check them out.
Yeah, no, I already have the.
And have you have a fiction book, horror book, and then you have a non-fiction book from New Zealand.
And then it's just the last. I have to admit, the last month I've just been quite lazy. Just because I started this job, and it's
the other avenues. Like Mike has also, I think he's done audio books, but he's also done the the Kindle.
Yeah, Kindle.
Very different.
Yeah, Kindle.
The downloadable PDF thing.
It's funny.
I can't read
just a bloke I work with was saying, "Oh, well, why don't you do an ebook? It would be much cheaper and it'd be easier to do." And I honestly, I just hadn't thought about that. Again, maybe it's just an analog thing, you know, pen and paper. I don't have a Kindle myself, but So
it doesn't have to be Kindle. There's a thing. So like you could actually, it's whatever reader.
Yeah, I mean, it's
as long as it's PDF.
It's weird for me to suggest it because I actually can't read anything on the screen.
Yeah.
I still buy books if I want to read them.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking it's just another option out there.
Bit of the first draft.
Yeah,
you could trial it with the first draft and see how many people are interested in the first draft. And
do a preview and then crowdfund.
Yeah.
Well, and then do the first chapter.
Here's the thing, right? So just recently, Twitter has said, like Elon Musk has said, like he's going to support creatives. And so my thought this morning was, because I was on Twitter, I was thinking, what if I wrote a chapter and released it on Twitter each week?
Yeah. From the upcoming book.
And so each week you release a chapter. And if we think back, Stephen King did that. All right, way back. He did it back what 20 years ago. Don't know. It was like it was some book. He did it every sort of like week. A chapter came out, and that's what kickstarted the whole. I think the whole ebooks and stuff. And
we used to do that, and it's sort of like what they used to do, like Dickens novels, who were originally serialized in magazines, and then they'd eventually get published as a book. So maybe Twitter's the new kind of magazine in that respect. But, yeah. I mean, the initial thought was to have it sort of full color, like that. And obviously, that's going to cost that bit more. And to be honest, now it's got to the point where I'm sort of like, I just want the damn thing published. I just like, I'm happy for it to be, I'm happy for it to be, white page, black text, central spine. Or even an ebook. I mean, ideally, I'd like to be able to hold the physical thing in my hand.
But I mean, everybody. I'm like, we're physical. Like we.
Yeah.
Why? That's why we have DVDs and books and because horror fans, we want to own that stuff.
Yeah.
And so in the end, we will own that stuff. But I mean, like the thing is that with having the Kindle situation, you get to see a preview, like say a chapter, and people get to say, "Oh, this is what." And it's actually really good, and visually. And next thing you know, you're slowly actually picking up funding and backers through that when you try to and people. The other thing is, publishers are on there watching who's, what book's doing well. Yeah. And if it's, if you're self-publishing, they'll be like out there going,
Didn't Twilight sell this fan fiction?
Yeah.
So that was online, wasn't it?
Was it that one or was it the other one? Grey.
Shades of Grey might have been fan fiction of Twilight.
That's it. Yeah, Shades of Grey was fan fiction of Twilight, and that's why Stephanie Meyer got this.
But it was online. And
that's right. Yeah. I was sort of vaguely doing that with. I might that sort of made me think I might do something more concrete. Well, kind of what I was already doing, which was putting up reviews on the Facebook page about the film. So that way I'm getting my own style of writing out there. But I've sort of all I've done thus far is sort of like quickly written something before I had to go off to work or go and make dinner or whatever. So what I might start doing, and my Letterboxd account as well, writing the reviews and just putting the links and but taking time like I used to with the blog and writing them that way, and that being a bit more and trying to be more frequent as well. I'm terrible at social media, which is not good. So, but mind you, Facebook. I've just got back onto Facebook, and it's pissing me off. I have to be honest. Everything just seems to be every post just seems to be a bloody chore. So I'm trying to be a good social media-er, but it's So
I think another way you could advertise it, like if you're going to do the movie reviews, is actually a good idea. But because New Zealand horror movies, I think somewhere in your review, like if you're going to compare the New Zealand movie to another one, might help. Because then you might find someone that's like, I grew up watching the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, I love it. Yeah, this guy has just compared this movie to it. Might go hunt this thing down. Might read his book because I like his taste. I think if you can add a few tie-ins here and there, even if they're not completely to do with New Zealand horror, but to do with horror itself.
That's what we usually do, isn't it? It's like, well, what is it like?
Well, it's like a link. Yeah, you go from one. You follow the links.
Yeah,
I got into this music. Now I'm going over here.
Yeah.
I'm listening to what they're listening to.
Film's terrible like that, isn't it? You get one link, and then the next thing you know, it goes exponentially, and the next thing you know, you've got about 30 links of people you need to catch up with who you've never heard of. Yeah, no, I kind of do that anyway. I mean, with for example, Next of Kin, it gets compared to The Shining. So I've talked about that in when writing about that, and Dead Kids obviously because it's part of the slasher movie movement that gets in there. So often do that anyway. I think you're right though. More sort of emphasis on that sort of helps. So just trying to find some kind of link to thing, and also I suppose for people interested in New Zealand culture, finding some sort of cultural sphere for it. Yeah, we've kind of done that when trying to sort of promote it to the publishers to go. you know, this is important for New Zealand culture because no one's written about this before, and it's a whole subgenre of New Zealand film. You're contributing to the breadth of knowledge and discussions of New Zealand arts, you know, and I think that is important. So, you know, particularly when it's
talking about that. Hold on. Talking about that, why not start a Kiwi horror group on Facebook?
Yeah, do you know what? That's kind of what I tried to do, although I'm just not very good at it. So all you gotta do is go, you know, open up, you know, a business account. Yeah. Right.
Group page, and just put that as the title. Right. And people will come to it who love it, who want to know, and you'll grow it, and that will become your fan base, and people will come from all over the world to it. Yeah. Or you can just go New NZ Horror Group, something like that. Yeah. Anything that's got to do with New Zealand, I think that'll work for you. We will join. I will join. I don't know about him, but I will definitely join because I want to know more.
I'll join so you can tell me those movies.
Yeah. And then, you know, we'll share the posts. Yeah. And now you'll have 1,000 people probably within a year. Yeah. And your book hasn't even been out yet. You know, that sort of thing. That's the whole idea of building community around what you're creating. And I think I love what you're doing. And I think I'm looking forward to it. And when it comes to horror, I mean, you know, it's part of, you know, it's what I've been into: music, horror, comics. You know, because it's fun. It's all part of creativity. It's part of entertainment, and it's good to know that someone is actually writing about this specific thing that I didn't even think about. Yeah. Right? Until I was, you know, Mike mentioned, you know, you posted out to me. I mean, messaged me. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you the last 5 minutes to talk about yourself and what you want, your final words. We're past our 2 hours, and just your final words. It's up to you, whatever you want to say, and we'll say our goodbyes after that.
No.
All right. Yeah. All right. Hold on, but I'm just going to put you on solo.
All right.
Give me 1 sec. I'll let you know when.
All right, no worries. Oh, that'll be it. That'll be it then. Well, remember this face. My name is Simon Kingsley-Holmes. I am writing a book. It's called The Last Great Hunting Ground, the New Zealand horror movie book. And I do have a page on Facebook, but because I'm, as I said, terrible at social media. If you could come and find me, and you're more than welcome. Let's get this book made, because it's, you know, as I say, it's a whole section of New Zealand culture that has not been discussed, and even better that it's maybe disreputable culture. That is important to talk about. Anything that broadens the knowledge of New Zealand, of a whole country's culture, is worth happening. If there are any publishers watching, please say yes to me, because I'd like someone to look at what I do and say, oh, you know what you're doing. Would you like a job? Would you like to write your book? And also go and support New Zealand horror movies and New Zealand filmmakers, because they're making stuff that is different and interesting, and there's some really great stuff out there. So find me, find them, and find yourselves. And thanks very much.
Where would we find you?
Well, you can find me. Well, look me up on Letterboxd, because I got a put there, which is Simon Kingsley-Holmes. That's just my name. You do have to have that through a Twitter handle, which I deleted my Twitter account, but it's still there, still exists. So, and on Facebook, the Facebook page is just The Last Great Hunting Ground, the New Zealand horror movie book, and I post there as often as I remember to do so. So please come along and like that. And I'm on Instagram at scumbagexpat, and I post that more regularly because Instagram's quite fun.
That's going to turn more people on to you.
But you will also be bombarded with promo for gigs. So but I do post about film stuff. And cool. Also, Oh, and there's another local guy in Christchurch, Bad Rap Reviews, who's worth following on Instagram. He posts horror stuff as well. But so that's where you can find me.
Awesome.
Or my address, but I'm not giving that out.
Yeah. Well, we'll do something on Facebook to let people know.
Thank you.
Shane, take farewells, goodbyes.
Interesting talking to you. I've learned about a few movies I've never heard of, which is great to learn from an expat. And I look forward to seeing your book when it gets printed.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's all talk to fans, other movie fans. It's just, you know, because you always end up. I don't know about you guys. I always end up spending the entire conversation going, "Oh no, I didn't know that." So, yeah, you come out of it knowing more, and then going, "Oh shit, I've got to buy that DVD now and that Blu-ray."
Yeah.
But it's been great fun. I've really enjoyed it.
That's basically where we are at. I've got about 10. I've got to look at watching. All right, so we'll end it there. Thank you everybody for joining us. Ka kite anō and farewell wherever you are. Thank you, Simon, for taking time out on a Sunday to join us, and cheers to my co-host. It was great to have Shane in with me because there's lots I didn't know, and I thought it would be best to have him in here. So everybody else, wherever you are, be well, and we'll see you next time on PlungeCast. And once again, thank you, Simon.